Lisa?
Thank you, Doug. Hi, everybody. As Doug said, my name is Lisa Lachlan. I work as a principal researcher for the American Institutes for Research. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about mentoring and induction, and also to see the large number of folks that are interested in this topic. I have been studying induction and teacher professional development and educator effectiveness for over a decade. And this topic that we're covering today is really a passion of mine, in part because it stems from my early teaching career where I had very little support and really struggled to do the best for my students. I went to graduate school after teaching because I figured there really had to be a better way. And after graduate school, I was fortunate enough to land my first job with the New Teacher Center, where I delved into all kinds of research on induction and mentoring, much of which I plan on talking to you about today. After about 4 or 5 years of working at the New Teacher Center, I joined the American Institutes for Research, where we run the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders. And our aim in that work is to foster the capacity of practitioners, researchers, and other experts to build and sustain a seamless system of support for great teachers and leaders across the nation. We do this work by supporting the 12 regional comprehensive centers that are shown on this slide. And we do so as a part of the 7 content centers that are listed in blue on the slide. We're all funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And the work that we do, as I said, is broad in the sense of supporting all of the efforts around great teachers and leaders. But one strand of this work that's recently emerging as one of great interest to many states is this one focused on mentoring and induction. So before we jump into looking at the research, I thought it would be useful for us to get on the same page about what we mean by mentoring and what we mean by induction. First, let's focus on this term induction. As stated here, induction is a system of coordinated and aligned supports that are designed to provide new educators with a supportive pathway into the profession. Induction is a larger system of support for new educators, and while the terms mentoring and induction are often used interchangeably, mentoring is really just one element of a comprehensive induction program. Mentoring generally is defined by the one-on-one support and feedback that is provided to a beginning teacher from an experienced or a veteran teacher. And an induction program often includes mentoring, but also includes additional support, such as help with curriculum planning and professional development, sometimes even PLCs or communities of practice that are focused just on new teachers exclusively. Induction has become of interest to many states and districts as a strategy for addressing the supports teachers need between pre-service and in-service. And as we all know, teacher and leader development occurs on a continuum that spans the entire career of an educator. Development doesn't just stop after pre-service, and it doesn't just continue into pre-service from there. New teachers really have unique needs at the start of their career, and that's where mentoring and induction play a critical role. And state education agencies often recognize these needs by putting into place policies that require some type of mentoring or induction supports for new teachers. In 2006, just last year, the New Teacher Center did a policy review of all 50 states and found that 29 of the states require some type of mentoring or induction. 20 require some level of support for first-time principals. 9 states require support for new teachers beyond their first 2 years. 16 states provide much needed funding for induction, and 2 states fund statewide induction programs. Those are Alaska and Kentucky. Our team at the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders also did a review just recently of the 16 submitted state ESSA plans, and we found that 14 of those states that submitted plans include teacher induction and mentoring. The states often cite talent management and equitable access to educators as reasons for pursuing these greater supports for new teachers. And we're also seeing more investment in induction and mentoring of principals. In our review, half of the states had programs that were focused on new principal support. It's also important to recognize that mentoring and induction are critical elements in any coordinated talent development strategy. Induction and mentoring can play a role in connecting and supporting many state and district-driven initiatives. And as you see on this slide, for example, improving equitable access to excellent educators, alleviating teacher shortages, addressing school turnaround, and implementing state or even district ESSA plans. Induction and mentoring are critical to these initiatives because they play an important role in how teachers grow professionally, how much they value collaboration and reflection, and in how they see themselves in the profession and in their school communities. So looking at the research now, both perception surveys and impact studies that examine the effects of mentoring and induction indicate important impacts on teacher collaboration, teacher retention, and student outcomes. New teachers are less likely to leave the profession if they're provided with a mentor in their content area and if they participate in formal planning and collaboration with other teachers. And teachers receiving high-quality induction and mentoring are more likely to show student performance gains equivalent to those of fourth-year teachers who did not have similar support. We also know that successful teachers cite mentoring as an important factor in their development. We recently did a study at the GTL Center that included over 300 national and state teachers of the year, and 68% of those that responded, of those 300 teachers, ranked mentoring among their top 3 most important supports for developing their effectiveness as a teacher. And maybe more importantly, in terms of what those mentors did, that was really critical, respondents ranked modeled effective teaching practices as the most important characteristic that their mentor shared for developing these teachers' effectiveness as a teacher. In a review of research on induction and mentoring that was conducted by Richard Ingersoll and Michael Strong in 2011, they found that the research supports claims that mentoring and induction have a positive impact on teacher commitment and retention, on teacher classroom instructional practices, and on student achievement. And most recently, there was a very important study that came out. It was conducted by SRI. It's a randomized controlled trial study of the new teacher center induction model, and it illustrated that 2 years of comprehensive induction support for teachers resulted in positive impacts on student achievement, such that students in grades 4 through 8 of teachers who participated in the NTC induction model scored higher on average than students of control teachers which were in business as usual type induction model. These impacts resulted in the equivalent of approximately 2 to 5 months additional months of learning, depending on the student's grade level and the subject area tested. But of course, in order to get results like this, we really need to take a moment to talk through what comprehensive induction is and how that differs from what we often talk about when we think about mentoring and induction, when we say terms like buddy mentoring or sink or swim induction, where mentoring is informal and the types of supports that teachers have are inconsistent at best. So, for example, when we talk about the results that you see on this slide under the sixth reason, the NCC model includes high-quality, trained instructional mentors, small mentor caseloads, mentoring conversations that are focused on data-driven instruction rather than other topics that just kind of come up as we go through the motions of our school day. And they're also very focused on regular job-embedded, in-person, one-on-one feedback that's focused on instruction and the consistent use of data for program improvement. So all of those elements are what get, at least initially, sound like the results that we see in this sixth reason here. So to replicate results like what we found in the SRI study, you would likely need to have a comprehensive model of induction. And the details of that are still yet to be fine-tuned. But we thought it would be useful to share this document with all of you. And you can see the handout is actually under materials here. If you look on the right side of your screen, there's handout 2 references and handout 1 high quality mentoring induction resources. That one we want you to click on and download. And just take a couple of minutes to look at the handout. We need you to probably skim it because we don't have too much time. But just get a sense of what is in this document. And you'll see that on the left side of the document, the left-hand column, there are a list of very high-quality mentoring and induction practices that all of us should really be aiming for. And then on the right side of the document, there are types of mentoring and induction practices that we may have in our systems, but may need some tweaking to get to a higher quality standard. So take a look at that, and then we'll ask you a couple questions about this handout. Okay, now that you've had a chance to look at this document, we're going to pop up a poll that is going to basically have you think about whether your school, district, or state currently fits into the practices that are on the left side of the handout or whether they're on the right-hand side of the handout. So go ahead and think about that and click on whichever one makes the most sense for you. We'll give another 30 seconds or so for people to answer. All right. Well, it looks like we're split. Wow, literally right down the middle. So it looks like our group has a combination of a lot of very high quality mentoring and induction practices, and also a lot of practices that maybe we need to improve. So thank you for taking the time to take that poll. This is actually really helpful for us to get a sense of where all of you are at. And, you know, the results are not totally a surprise. I mean, if we all fell on the left side of the document, we probably wouldn't need a webinar like this today. So, so looking at other research that is aligned with this, we know that there's wide variation on how mentoring and induction take place in schools and districts. So, like I said, it's not a surprise to see these results. There was a study that is highlighted here from the Regional Education Laboratory Central States that looked at school district policies and examined who provides mentoring, how time is spent when mentoring occurs, whether mentors are required to observe mentees, and also barriers that districts identify in implementing mentoring programs. And they had about 1,000 districts respond, including superintendents and other district administrative leaders. And they completed the survey in the 2013-14 school year. The study found that most districts, mentoring is provided primarily by full-time teachers without release time. That 69% of those districts across all 5 of these states, they reported that mentoring is provided primarily by full-time teachers who receive no release time from their teaching responsibilities. These teachers are expected to teach their regular full-time class load on top of mentoring duties, which of course can reduce their capacity to provide mentoring support. In about 11% of districts, full-time teachers receive partial release time to mentor, and it was just less than 3% of districts where mentoring is provided primarily by full-time teachers who are given full release time. In the same study, the districts in 5 states were asked about the duration of mentoring support. In most districts, these 5 states, mentoring ends or mentoring time declines after the first year. Across all 5 states, 77% of districts indicate that after the first year, mentoring programs either end or they taper off. In about 23% of districts, mentoring stays the same after the first year. And of course, there is some variation across the states. In Missouri, for example, where state policy requires that districts provide mentoring for longer than a single school year, 42% of districts indicate that mentoring programs stay the same after the first year. So how do we get the impacts that we hope to achieve, whether the focus is instructional efficacy, teacher retention, or student achievement, or in the new ESSA plans, equitable access to effective teachers? It's important to note that the research is somewhat limited due to the variation in induction components across districts and across states, and of course the quality of design of many studies. But we do know from the review that I mentioned earlier that beginning teachers who participate in some kind of induction tend to have higher satisfaction, commitment, and/or retention. Likewise, the same is true for teachers in terms of their classroom practices. Most of the research suggests that beginning teachers who participate in some kind of induction perform better at various aspects of teaching, such as keeping students on task, developing workable lesson plans, or demonstrating successful classroom management. The findings around teacher retention, I think we're seeing a lot of energy in this area right now, which is wonderful, and yet the results there are less consistent, but it could be argued that more comprehensive induction programs lead to greater results in teacher retention. And I think if anything else, we know that more research really needs to be conducted in this area. And then finally, for student achievement, most of the studies reviewed showed that students of beginning teachers who participated in some kind of induction had higher scores or gains on academic achievement tests. So to achieve these outcomes, states and districts really need to think bigger than buddy mentoring or the sink or swim method of induction and recognize that comprehensive induction is worth the cost. So this slide illustrates some of the components for a truly comprehensive mentoring and induction program. And we'd like to do another poll at this time and just take a moment to learn about how your context relates to these different components of induction. So of these 9, how many does your team plan on addressing in the next academic year? All right, let's just take 10 more seconds or so for people to add their responses. Okay. Wow. Well, that is really fascinating. So it looks like we have a lot of energy put into ongoing professional development and support for mentors. That was the highest rated one. And then we also have a lot of energy put into professional teaching standards and data-driven conversation, which is wonderful to see. Ongoing beginning teacher professional development, and then a few that had 15 multi-year mentoring, intensive and specific guidance moving teacher practice forward, and collaboration with all stakeholders. That's great to see. So very interesting results, and this is just one poll. I think we could learn a lot more if we were having a conversation. Certainly this one that is at the bottom here, number 8, clear roles and responsibilities for administrators. That's an area where it often gets overlooked, and yet is such an important piece of a comprehensive induction program. So it could be that you all have done this already, but it's certainly something that is important, and maybe we can talk more about as we delve into the question and answer period. And so I'll go back to my slides here. Thank you, Jackie. And talk a little bit about the big issue that comes to mind a lot when we talk about this work, which is funding for this work. The REL study that I talked about earlier really found, when they asked all these districts about the limitations or the barriers to doing comprehensive induction, those districts really emphasize the lack of funding, the lack of time, and lack of stipends that were most commonly identified as barriers to implementing comprehensive programs. So while we see this lack of funding, we also have to recognize that teacher attrition, so teachers leaving the profession, is also extremely costly. Like many critical elements of schooling, we all need to consider how important funding is to have these key components of a robust induction program. So providing 2 years of mentoring support, offering stipends, and release time for mentors, those are all elements that require funding, not to mention the time and resources it takes for all the other pieces. But turnover represents a tremendous cost to school districts. For example, in this study, in the second bullet here from the Alliance for Excellent Education, they found that teacher attrition in the United States overall costs more than $2 billion every year, and that teachers who leave cost districts approximately $10,000. So you can imagine the major costs that are associated with this attrition include recruiting teachers, hiring them, inducting them, training, providing all sorts of professional development. And maybe more importantly, we have to keep in mind that high teacher turnover also increases the likelihood that students are taught by less experienced teachers. And those less experienced teachers, unfortunately, are less effective than teachers who have more experience. So these findings really should push all of us to explore ways to measure return on investment of mentoring programs to justify the required investments. The study that is listed there at the bottom of the slide by VR and Strong is a great example of how the work can be quantified. And I think, yeah, we have that in the question and discussion box. If you're interested, that's a great way of thinking about how the work actually can be translated into a cost-benefit analysis. So while the funding piece is never easy to talk about, there is some good news, and that is that some states are already funding induction programs. As I cited earlier, this review that was conducted by the New Teacher Center, 16 states provided some dedicated funding for induction as they did that policy review. And even better news is that in our review of those ESSA plans that were recently submitted, 12 of the 16 states are planning on using Title IIA dollars for induction, and 2 states are using state funds to support new induction and mentoring efforts. And one example of that, Massachusetts, they created induction and mentoring guidelines to assist districts in the creation of their teacher and administrator induction programs and to align those programs with their educator effectiveness initiative. They also link their work to teacher licensure such that teachers have to participate in induction in order to receive their professional license. And they're requiring districts to produce reports to the state that then the state is going to turn into resources, tools, and guidance on how to improve induction programs. So all in all, we're very much looking forward to seeing what the remaining states commit to with regard to induction and mentoring in the ESSA plans that are due next month. And finally, we at the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders are in the process of developing technical assistance plans that will support our regional comprehensive centers, our states, and our districts in developing mentoring and induction programs. Really, we're focused on helping kind of with the initial steps of that work. And so we're developing a toolkit that will support all of these organizations in determining gaps in their current systems, in supporting data-driven dialogue, and in facilitating all of the decision-making processes that go into developing a comprehensive mentoring and induction system. So if you would like more information on these resources or any of the research that is discussed here, please feel free to contact me. This is my, that's a disclaimer, but my email address is here on this slide. And you can also leave your email in the chat box, and we can keep you posted on our progress. So with that, I'll end my presentation and turn it back over to Doug.
Thank you, Lisa. That was absolutely fabulous. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the folks who posted some comments. And I want to thank Cora from the Rel Southwest for posting a link to one of the important sort of cost-benefit analyses with the question, is mentoring worth the money? I think this comes up a lot in the work. Lisa, what I'd like to do is actually use one of the questions that the folks who submitted when they registered. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and both post that question in the chat box and also ask it orally so everybody can hear it. So one of the sort of big questions that came up is, what's been the most beneficial type of support for the teachers being mentored, and what supports do mentors find the most beneficial?
Thank you, Doug. That's a really good question. And I will answer it from a researcher's perspective and just say that there hasn't been a lot of research conducted in this area, but there was a study in 2004. Actually, there were two studies in 2004 conducted by Tom Smith and Richard Ingersoll, and there's one that's cited in the resources, but the one that I want to speak to answer this question is actually the one that's by Smith and Ingersoll. They flipped their names in the one that I cited earlier. So this is Smith and Ingersoll 2004, where they did a review of the national longitudinal data, the SAS data that was available on teacher experience. And they found that the most salient factors of an induction program were having a mentor from the same subject area, having common planning time with other teachers in the same subject area, and being a part of an external network of teachers. So very much mentoring and collaboration focused, but not just collaboration and mentoring for the sake of kind of talking about their day-to-day, but really the focus on instruction. And they found that teachers that participate in the induction programs that offered a combination of supports, so ones that include mentoring and group induction activities where new teachers are actually learning together in a professional development context, those teachers were less likely to either move schools or leave the profession altogether. So I hope that answers the question. Certainly I think this is a question that is also very contextual, but in terms of the research, that's the research base that we have at this time.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Lisa. I really appreciate it. There's another question here, again, from the folks who registered. If there are new questions, please feel free to type them in the questions and discussion box. Also, before I ask the second question, I did want to point out that Lisa did post a couple of resources which are available for download, so you should feel free to click on that resources box and take a look at the information she's posted. But the second question that was asked in our registration was, how are mentors selected? And I'm going to open this up first to Lisa and then to Katy Ackley from the Tulsa Public School System, where she's going to also give a presentation after. But I thought it would be helpful to sort of take a national look and then ask Katy to chime in on how Tulsa, Oklahoma selects their mentors.
Sounds good, Doug. So mentor selection is a really critical part of this work, so it's a great question. We did a review of a variety of different mentoring and induction research and other resources that states had pulled together, and pulled all of that together and kind of were able to see that there are some really important criteria that should be addressed in mentor selection in all contexts. And those relate to asking questions around formative assessment and the use of summative data to reflect on practice and improve student learning. And also asking questions around making sure that any potential mentor has a sufficient repertoire of instructional strategies to adjust instruction to meet the needs of diverse learners so that they can then translate that into working with new teachers. Also asking if the potential mentor effectively understands and uses the learning standards and the teaching standards, because those are often used in working with new teachers. So do they have a deep understanding and a capacity to use the teaching standards or whatever type of teaching framework is used in the state or the district to support that new teacher toward more effective instruction. Those are, I would say, they're very much the backbone of mentor selection. And then in terms of other areas to consider that are also really important but may be more flexible in terms of the context or in terms of your prioritization, you would also want to consider attitude and character, professional competence and experience in their role in teaching, and of course communication and interpersonal skills, which are really instrumental in doing the work of mentoring.
Great, thank you so much. Katy, would you like to go ahead and give your perspective from Tulsa's experience on how you select the mentors in Tulsa? And then I'm also going to throw out one more question to you that came from our registration, and that is, are the coaches full-time, which I think you're going to go into in your presentation, but I figured I'd go ahead and post that question here as well.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So I think if it's okay, I'll answer those questions kind of backwards. The short answer to that second question is yes, our coaches and our mentors are full-time. They're fully released from their teaching responsibilities to just focus on the teacher support that they provide. And I'll go into a little bit more about sort of the structure of what I kind of think of as a two-pronged support system, in that I'm very fortunate that in addition to our mentor team, we have a very strong instructional coaching program. And so our instructional coaches, as well as our new teacher mentors, are trained through our partnership with New Teacher Center. And I have the luxury when I have openings for mentor positions, which are highly sought after, I might add, to be able to pull from that pool of instructional coaches who are already coming with some foundational knowledge around those New Teacher Center priorities and the tools that we use. And so I really look for those that have really embraced those processes, as well as kind of what Lisa spoke to, the dispositions and the skills that we look for someone in the mentoring role.
All right, well that's great. And can you speak a little bit to how the mentors are specifically selected? Do you have an interview process, or do you just pull from that pool of coaches?
Typically, we pull from that pool of coaches. They have gone through the interview process for to be an instructional coach. I work very closely with the instructional coaches and their supervisor, and so I get the opportunity to work with them in partnership with our mentors, and so get the opportunity to really know them and have conversations about with my colleagues about the folks that have an interest in and have kind of the skills and to move into that mentor role.
Great, and Don chimed in with a really good question about the difference between a mentor and a coach. So I'm not sure if we're eating into your actual presentation, Katy, but if you'd like to go ahead and sort of differentiate between the roles of those two play in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that may help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it'll help to set some context as well. And as I said, we have both new teacher mentors and instructional coaches, and while they do a lot of similar work, there are definite differences And the biggest one, and probably the most obvious one, is that our new teacher mentors really focus on the support of those beginning year teachers, whereas our instructional coaches have a bit more flexibility to kind of support any teacher, really, who on a needs-based or an opt-in basis. And as I said, a lot of the same processes and protocols that our mentors would use with a new teacher, but not necessarily with a new teacher every time. So I hope that helps provide a little bit of context.
Great, thank you so much. And now we're going to end this little portion of the QA, and we're going to give Katy a chance to both more formally introduce herself and then go ahead and talk about mentoring in the Tulsa context.